Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Go Digital Western Cape webinar series, brought to you by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism here at the Western Cape Government. My name is Robert Davids, and I'm with the Digital Economy Unit at the department, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's webinar. Firstly, before we continue, may I please ask all members of the audience to mute their microphones and also to turn off their videos, everybody besides the presenters, and this is just so that our session can run quite smoothly. So thank you for understanding, and we appreciate your cooperation. So on that note, also to all our audience members, we are very excited to have you here. Thank you for your interest in this webinar. Thank you for your time. And thanks for joining us. We have a very exciting topic today, as you know. It's on crowdfunding, which obviously all of you know, and that's why you've joined us. And we are excited to announce that we have a very prominent panel of speakers and panelists joining us today from some of the leading crowdfunding platforms in the country. We have, as you know, Elizabeth Howard from the African Crowdfunding Association, and we welcome Elizabeth. We have Mnangaliso Nxumalo from Uprise.Africa, and Patrick Schofield, who I suppose is from a few. Patrick's from Thundafund, BackaBuddy, Uprise.Africa, so we're covering all the bases there. So to our panelists, thank you too for your time, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us here today on this webinar. We're really excited to have you here, and especially in Cape Town today. It's for those of you in Cape Town, it's quite chilly. So I hope everybody's warm and has a cup of coffee close by, or tea if that's your thing, so that we can have a great webinar, great information, and be comfortable at the same time. So for those of you who haven't joined us before I continue, I would just like to touch on a few what we refer to as house rules, and I assume everybody can see my screen. So firstly, and this is mainly just for the webinar to run smoothly, I just would like to inform you that this webinar is being recorded, because we will make a copy available of the webinar on our Digital Economy website in the future. And then to all audience members, we ask you to please mute your devices, and we also ask you to turn off your videos. And that's just for our presenters to have an uninterrupted flow during their presentations to us. Then also, which is important, we have 3 presenters today, and we will be asking that if you have any questions, you can post your questions in the chat window. There's a chat window function on Microsoft Teams. So if you could please chat or write your questions in the chat window at the end of the 3 presentations, so right at the end, we'll have what we refer to as a moderated question and answer session. If time allows, because the webinar is only 1 hour long, if time allows, we'll get through all of the questions and pose them to the panelists. If there's not enough time, we please ask your understanding, and we'll try and answer them as best possible through another medium. Then the last thing I would like to say, I mean, you can see my slide on the screen, but lastly, for those of you who are active on social media, we ask you to use the hashtag Go Digital Western Cape or Go Digital WC if you want to share information about this webinar. Okay, so that's some housekeeping out of the way. Then coming to today's webinar and the topic of crowdfunding. So for those of you who don't know, the Go Digital Western Cape webinar series is an initiative, as I said, of the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. And we've put together this series particularly to assist businesses and support them in general, but also specifically during this really challenging time that everybody's going through, this period of the COVID-19 era. The focus of the webinar series is very much around the digitization of businesses, digital tools, digital systems, digital platforms, which are important to business on its own, but also is becoming particularly relevant during the COVID-19 era that we are in. So the broad theme of the Go Digital webinar series is around digital transformation and digital tools and systems for your businesses. So topics we've covered in the past has been on e-commerce. We've had topics on digital marketing. We'll have upcoming topics on cybersecurity, legal aspects of online business. So it's a very wide range of topics. And it's within this context that we are also presenting this webinar today on crowdfunding as an alternate source of fundraising for businesses. The series is very much focused on entrepreneurs and SMEs, especially for those in the non-tech sector. So if you're not a techie or not familiar with all these digital tools, that's completely okay. We are trying to orientate these webinars to yourselves. Some of you may have joined us last week on the Google My Business webinar. And in that webinar and how it flows in the series, you saw the importance of why it is valuable to have an online visibility, to be able for people to find you online, for you to have an online presence, but also how important it is to tell your story online, because that is important. If people can find you online, then you won't be able to connect with them and build your ecosystem. So along those lines, and taking it to a completely next level, crowdfunding comes into play. And many of you may be familiar with crowdfunding. Some of you may not be that familiar. In South Africa, we have very established crowdfunding platforms. In Africa, there are many. Internationally, it's taken off over the years. But what we're going to try to do today is to give you a bit more insight into how crowdfunding platforms work, what value there is, how it can add value to your business, how it can aid your business, and looking a bit at the ins and the outs, getting some information on some of the platforms. And for that, we have been graced with, as I said, a very prominent panel of experts in the field. And maybe just before I hand over to our first speaker, Elizabeth Howard, what we're also going to try and do today is, which something I found on the Thundafund website, is to explain why crowdfunding is more than just about funds. So on that note, I thank you once again for joining us, and we can get right into the thick of things. And I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is Elizabeth Howard from the African Crowdfunding Association. Okay, Elizabeth, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert. It's a pleasure to, and I can't see your faces, but hello to all the listeners, to the entrepreneurs. It's a privilege for me to be able to speak to you today, and I know that you're probably going through some really tough times right now. And so I think we're in the Western Cape very, very blessed to have people like Robert and Western Cape government to give us this opportunity to learn about alternatives to make us a little bit more resilient. So thanks very much, Robert. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking to you about crowdfunding. I'll give you an overview. I'll tell you a little bit about the different ways to use crowdfunding, the different models. I'll say a few words on why it's particularly relevant in the COVID recovery period. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the African Crowdfunding Association, which is the non-profit organization that I currently lead. So you've probably heard all about crowdfunding at some point. If you have tried to raise capital and not been successful getting loans from banks or attracting private investors in your network. So you've probably come across crowdfunding in the international context. As Robert mentioned, crowdfunding is a massive alternative finance tool that is used all over the Western world and in the East. The global market is sitting at around $96 billion and growing quite substantially in some of its key markets like China and the US. In Africa, however, we really have a very tiny percentage of that market, about 0.3% apparently. So that's about $2.5 billion estimated in 2025. The last data we have for the amount that's been raised in Africa or on behalf of African projects is in 2015, there was about $126 million that was raised. And unfortunately, about 2/3 of that was actually raised on crowdfunding platforms that are outside of Africa. So these are African entrepreneurs that are using platforms like Seedrs in the UK, Crowdcube, Kickstarter in the US, that have figured out a way to actually raise in those countries on behalf of their projects back home. But there was about $32 million that was raised on local African platforms. And when you look at what type of crowdfunding is happening on those local platforms, you've got about 18 million of it going to SME finance and about 14 million of it going to real estate finance, which is quite interesting. You've got some key beneficiary countries that have emerged in crowdfunding, which are concentrated in East Africa and South Africa. So that was 2015. Things have evolved quite a lot. You've seen notably the introduction of agriculture crowdfunding, which is very popular in West Africa, Nigeria and Ghana, and also somewhat in South Africa. So the basic idea here is that you have a project, and it might be at various stages, might be at the idea stage, or you might be an experienced SME, and you want to raise capital from the people who know you, and those could be your community, it could be your customers, and you're going to try and reach them using a tech tool, so typically an internet platform that has a suite of fundraising tools behind it, and you'll sort of conduct this capital raising campaign through the use of social media, and you'll really mobilize your network that way. So you're basically raising funds from the crowd. Now, the type of funding you might raise will really depend on your project. It might not even be capital. You might be giving some sort of non-financial compensation to the people who want to back you. So that's known as rewards crowdfunding. You might be offering shares to your crowd investors. If you are seeking equity capital, so that's known as equity crowdfunding, you might be looking to sort of borrow money from a crowd of investors who also might know you and who might have fewer requirements on the collateral side, and that would be known as debt crowdfunding. You might also want to crowdfund an invoice. So you get sort of invoiced receivables-based crowdfunding and factoring-based crowdfunding. So that's sort of in the SME finance space. Then, like I mentioned earlier, you've got agri crowdfunding, which is a specialized type of crowdfunding where you might own farmland, but not be able to actually exploit that land. You might not be able to work the land, and you get crowdfunding intermediaries that sort of bundle together finance and access to smallholder farmers and inputs like fertilizers. And you can, as a crowd investor, actually fund this farmland and actually get a return when at the time of harvest. You might also have the opportunity to fund a herd of cattle or one cow on a herd of cattle in return for return when that cattle is sort of sold into the market. So there are very, very many types of crowdfunding that are relevant to different cultural contexts, that are relevant to different companies that are at different stages in their growth journey. So why is crowdfunding particularly relevant for SMEs now? So there are at least 4 reasons or 4 trends, if you will, that I think favor the use of crowdfunding in the COVID recovery. And I'm talking specifically around SME finance at this time. Basically, we've gone into a risk-off regime, which means that there's just a lot less capital going around for SMEs and startups, and also fund managers. So these are your classic institutional mainstream investors. They themselves are struggling to actually raise their funds. They're struggling to invest. A lot of them are based abroad. They can't fly around to come and meet you. They can't come and do due diligence and visit your site right now. So they tend to be focusing their capital on their existing clients, their existing portfolio, and they're struggling to actually get out of that. So there's less money for everyone. The second reason is that we're in a global recession again, and that means that obviously demand is low. I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And so the valuation of your company will decrease. And if the valuation of your company decreases, it makes it very difficult for you to raise large amounts of capital. And so it's very expensive to do that. So you actually decrease the amount that you're raising. And for those of you who've tried to raise a small amount of capital, you probably would have experienced a bit of a paradox, and that it's actually quite hard to raise a small amount of capital, whereas it might be easier to raise a very large amount of capital. And that's just because of the risk dynamics. So when you're in this, what we call the small deal space, the missing middle SME space, you really do struggle to raise from your mainstream financiers. And crowdfunding is particularly good at dealing with those small amounts of capital. A third reason is that, again, as you probably noticed, there's quite a lot of exchange rate volatility right now, and it's much safer for SMEs to raise in local currency. Again, a lot of the traditional financiers, especially in the equity space, are foreign. They don't like lending often in local currency. So that's why crowdfunding can be quite useful. And the sort of fourth reason is quite obvious. We're in a social distancing environment now. There's travel bans, and anyone trying to make investments in SMEs actually need to digitize their whole investment process to get it done. I mentioned earlier due diligence. That's normally quite a hands-on process. We now need to figure out how to actually invest from a distance. So crowdfunding is great in that it has local currency, digitized investment processes. It's capable of doing small investment sizes in an economically viable way. And it's an alternative to your mainstream finance, which is struggling right now to reach our corners of the market. So one final word on the African Crowdfunding Association. So what I didn't mention earlier is that within the types of crowdfunding that exist, there are some forms of crowdfunding in which you as a project sponsor are offering a non-financial compensation to your backers. And when you have a non-financial compensation, you are outside of the regulatory space. So you're offering, I don't know, t-shirt or CD or pre-order, or you are getting donations. That type of crowdfunding does not require a regulatory framework. But all the other ones that do offer a form of financial return to the investors fall into a regulated space. And in Africa, with one exception of Morocco, there's not a single crowdfunding regulatory framework that is in place. And that makes it quite challenging for all the players in the space to actually conduct their operations in a regulated way. So ACFA, the African Crowdfunding Association, has stepped in to fill that gap. So it's an industry association. You can go to the website, africancrowd.org, and that enables you as a potential investor or consumer, even a project sponsor, to understand more about the industry. It enables you to find a reputable platform. So Thundafund, Backabuddy, and Uprise.Africa are all members of the African Crowdfunding Association. And that means that they have met a minimum requirements of governance and compliance. And then there is also a lot of work that we do actually directly with African regulatory authorities to assist them to put in place an appropriate regulatory framework. So that's what we do. I really encourage you to check out the website before you want to invest in through a crowdfunding platform. And also if you as an entrepreneur want to understand a little bit more about the space. Robert, I'll stop there. I think I might have gone over my time a little bit. So yeah, on to, I guess, Mnangaliso.
Yes. Thank you very, very much, Elizabeth. That was really excellent. I think just before we go over to Mnangaliso, a couple of points. As I said, this is a short webinar, but one thing, it's quite a dynamic space to navigate, and opportunities for both those appealing for funds and investors. It's very dynamic. And I think that we'll probably hear throughout the session today that definitely the opportunities are there, but we need to do a bit of more research for those of the audience, and probably also reach out to one of the organizations that work in this space to find out more about the regulations and the ins and the outs. But really great overview, and I'm not going to take up too much more time. But with that, from Elizabeth, I'm going to hand over to Mnangaliso Nxumalo, If you could take over, Mnangaliso, thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand over to you. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And once again, I'd like to also welcome everyone and also to thank the Western Cape government for such a great initiative. I am going to do a bit of a presentation of my conversation with you. So I'm hoping that everyone can see the screen. Maybe Robert, you can give me a thumbs up if you do see the screen.
Thank you, Mnangaliso. We can see the screen. All good to go.
No problem. So let's shoot. So as Elizabeth has already highlighted the different kinds of crowdfunding initiatives, ours is a equity crowdfunding platform, and it is a first of its kind in Africa, and we are really proud of it. And I'll take you through in terms of what we do. But firstly, I think I'm not going to dwell much on this slide because Elizabeth has already touched on in terms of the numbers or the role that equity crowdfunding plays globally. But one of the important parts that I wanted to highlight is the growth that we are seeing throughout the world in terms of the growth of this space, especially around equity crowdfunding. If you look at the UK and the US, you're seeing triple-digit exponential growth year on year in terms of the impact that equity crowdfunding plays in those jurisdictions. Now, why equity crowdfunding in South Africa? We believe that it's an alternative funding solution, an investment model that is available to all kinds of businesses that are sort of trading in the market. And then also crowdfunding de-risks the investment process as well. And also we help to establish a marketplace. So once we profile our entrepreneurs in our platform, it gives more confidence from both outside investors and also even probably providers as well to work with such businesses in the long term, because now they have a profile or they are well known in terms of raising their profile from an infant business. In South Africa also, what is the importance of equity crowdfunding is that we provide access to an investment that will be able to be transparent, provide economic empowerment, and as a trusted platform in the sense that, which Elizabeth has already highlighted, that there's a lot of regulatory frameworks that support this kind of platforms. As a new alternative investment or funding model, there is a lot of question marks around how does it work, and is it a trusted platform, or how do I ensure that I'm getting my money's worth in terms of these kind of investments? So this is what crowdfunding provides in terms of, rather than just going straight to maybe family members or friends and borrowing money, and there's no regulatory framework that governs that relationship. So this equity crowdfunding provides that kind of opportunity for one to be invested and have a trusted model that is behind it. Then the next point that I just wanted to discuss is in terms of how it works. So equity crowdfunding is how it works with Uprise.Africa is that as an entrepreneur, you come onto the platform with your idea, it gets evaluated, and then once it passes that first evaluation stage, we then prepare all the necessary documentation that needs to support your pitch. So we will do a legal review and also a financial review in terms of your model or your pitch to the platform. And purely because we are targeting to go into a retail investor market. So we need to ensure that we have ticked all the boxes and the businesses that we profile meet all the minimum requirements. And then once that has been done, then there's we then pitch the business onto our platform. And usually this would take about anything between 30 to 60 days, where we allow our vast network of investors to go into the platform and review the business, and if they like it, they make a pledge or invest into the business. Also, what we do is we ask that the entrepreneur also gives access to their networks, because that will also expand and also accelerate the rate of attracting investors to their business. And then once we've closed the business as successful, or it has met the minimum tipping point, which is the minimum amount that would be required to continue as a business, then we issue share certificates through our digital partners as well, and then the cash is then sent to the entrepreneur. And then what we also do, which is fantastic, is then post-investment management, where we then do reporting back to the investors on a quarterly basis in terms of how the business is doing, and ensuring that the business is also sort of complying to all the requirements and making sure that they are responsible in terms of even their day-to-day. Because we, through equity crowdfunding, you essentially are a shareholder of that business. And the last step, which actually is a new step that we have secured since last year, and we are also working with a couple of new exchanges, is what we call the listing of the business. So this affords the business one, additional liquidity, in the sense that once you've listed on any one of the exchange partners that we have, you allow for new investors to come in and be able to access your company as well, and buy into your company as well. But secondly, it also allows liquidity to the investors, the initial crowd investors that supported you at the beginning, in the sense that if they do not maybe want to be locked in for the long term in terms of supporting you as a business, they would be able to then sell their shares to any available, or it's a buy and demand sort of market. So what the exchange allows is that liquidity in terms of support, both for the entrepreneur and also for the investor as well. Why Uprise.Africa? I believe we've done a lot of extensive research, and we've gained a lot of knowledge and know-how in terms of ensuring that the platform is able to support entrepreneurs, so from capital to grow business, marketing and an awareness, validations, and brand awareness as well. This is a fantastic platform that gives any entrepreneur that comes on board an opportunity to scale up their business, but more than scale up, obviously looking to raising capital to support their business going forward. And then we also have a strong team of expertise that are industry players or industry gurus in terms of understanding the role that equity crowdfunding has in the SMME space, and also in just the overall South African investment opportunity as well. And we are a Pan-African focused platform. So as much as the businesses need to be registered in South Africa, where any African business can come in onto the platform, as long as they meet all the valuation points, we are able to then list them onto the platform. We, as a platform, Uprise.Africa uses primarily various partners in terms of support of the functions. So a lot of the work that we do is outsourced to various providers that are experts in those relevant fields. So for instance, when we do due diligence and vetting, we do require independent companies or individuals that would be able to then evaluate the businesses that come on board, so that we keep the independence when it comes to the businesses that come on board. We also work with a lot of incubators and also government agencies that also support our platform in terms of ensuring that we are also attracting the entrepreneurs that work with them, and ensure that we also provide support, because a lot of businesses in South Africa are currently looking for additional funding. So this becomes obviously an alternative solution outside of some of the initiatives that maybe perhaps government and non-government institutions, non-profit institutions may offer to them. Our attraction since launch is that we've seen a very fantastic growth since launch, which was in 2016, just over 200% in terms of new users, and this is both from entrepreneurs and also investors coming onto the platform. We've also increased in terms of our awareness or our appearances in terms of public, in the sense that our media coverage has actually grown. We've got over 50 articles that have been published, and this provides for no paid media, even not just for Uprise, but for the underlying entrepreneurs that we do profile on our platform. This is just to mention a few of our awards that we've been nominated or have won over the couple of years that we have been in existence. I just wanted to, before we close off, just to give you an example of some of our successful and not so successful campaigns. One of our star campaigns is Drifter Brewery Company. I believe it's also in the Western Cape. The company was looking to raise 3 million for a 12% equity stake in the business. They did manage to actually surpass the target, because over the first 24 hours, we'd already raised 100,000 from investors, and within 30 days, we had already reached that target. So when we closed the campaign, according to the process, we followed all due process. Unfortunately, Drifters Breweries did not nominate to list onto the one of our exchange partners, which is the Zarex, but we still have a lot of post-investment engagement from appointing a board member that sits on the Drifter Brewery Company and would be able to then give us quarterly updates. One of the recent updates, for instance, is that, as we would know, is that during the lockdown period, alcohol not being sold, what is Drifters' position and how are they looking to survive such a period? So we then give feedback to investors just to give them that confidence that, as much as this is the situation, the long-term investment that they have is still a good and great investment for them to be in. The next one is a campaign that was not so successful like the previous one that I've mentioned. So MyImali is more of a tech business, and they were looking to raise 25 million through the platform for a 20% equity stake in the business. Within the 60-day period that we had with them, unfortunately, they only reached about close to 34,000, but they didn't go over 100,000 in terms of investment into the campaign. And so when we came to close at the end of November, we closed the campaign as unsuccessful and returned and refunded all the pledged investments to the investors that had pledged. But what is fantastic to know, and this is why this is very important, that the crowdfunding platforms, the role that they play is even beyond just the capital that you can raise, but also a week later they were able to receive 16 million from another VC fund or angel investor that invested in the business. So as much as equity crowdfunding did not work for them, but it was able to raise a profile for them to be able to attract such kind of investments into their business as well. And just in closing, our role is as Uprise.Africa, when you come to our platform, we really do want to be your partners, and we hold your hand as businesses in terms of the due diligence, legal compliance, financial compliance, and actually building the pitch and marketing the pitch as well. We also are able to give that post investment reporting to shareholders. So at no point do we then let go of your hand in terms of supporting you as a business. Because we have brought this marriage of investor to investors to your business and your business. And we would love to carry that investor as an equity crowdfunding. We believe in that long-term relationship because typically the shareholders become your marriage partners for life in terms of your business lifespan. And just in closing, Uprise seeks to democratize funding by disrupting current funding landscape in the South African funding landscape. So this is very important for us, and it's at the core of our value proposition and our ethos as well. Thank you so much, Robert. I have left our information, and I believe we will share some of our information later on as we continue our presentations as well. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mnangaliso. That was really informative and eye-opening. So I must admit, as I was listening to what you're saying and thinking of what Elizabeth had shared earlier, it just demonstrated once again how broad the scope is for crowdfunding and the various platforms. I mean, from the sense that you can raise a few 10,000 for a campaign all the way up to 3 million or aim for 25 million. And also that it kind of levels the playing field for those who would like to invest, because perhaps there could be a family member or someone in your local community who could invest, but it could also be an international private investor or big company, and it really levels the playing fields across a variety of measures. And I'm glad that you were able to share a success story and one that was not so successful and then became successful, because as with everything, some things work for some companies or some businesses and others don't. And it's important to know that the basic principles of investment still count, because you still need a good business or a good product or a good service. You still need to tell a good story. But I think these platforms that we're hearing about today really just opens the game to everybody to come in with the support of the various crowdfunding platforms, such as yourself and others that we have here today. So thank you very much, Mnangaliso. With that, I'm going to introduce and hand over to our next speaker, who is Patrick Schofield. And Patrick kind of, for those who know him, has been a leader in this field for many years. You can see his bio on the screen. He's been involved on many different platforms. So thank you very much, Patrick, for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us today. I'm not going to try and segue this in a very smart way, because I think you're a great presenter to take us to the finish line of today's webinar. So with that, Patrick, we look forward to what you have to say, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Great, yeah, and thanks for welcoming me onto this platform to join. Guys, as I speak, if there's any questions and so forth that you want to ask, just pop them into the chat on the side, and I will either speak to them directly as we talk, or actually, as I said afterwards, happy to answer too. Maybe just a bit of background in terms of where I've come from in the world. Oops, hold on, where am I? There. Why crowdfunding for me? I've been involved in social enterprise for sure, near on 15, 20 years or so, pretty much since I left school. And what I love about crowdfunding is that it allows opportunities for people to invest in things that they want to see happen in the world. So whether it's a business, if there's a local coffee shop, if it's a canning factory, if it's a restaurant, if it's an organization that's going to make doors. It allows people to say, I believe in this entrepreneur, I'm going to get behind them, and either I will get a return in terms of equity, or I'll actually get some product. But it really, we talk about democratization of financing, and that's very much what crowdfunding is about. My specific area of focus and what I enjoy the most is in the space of impact. So that's why today I'm specifically going to talk about Thundafund, which is a rewards-based crowdfunding platform, and kind of where everything started. And I'll also mention BackerBuddy as well. It's on the purely commercial side, Uprise.Africa. Mnangaliso, thanks so much for speaking to Uprise. Uprise is really pioneering the space in terms of investment crowdfunding, and I'm really excited to see what they're doing. So it's cool to see them coming through. And guys, it's as you'll know, any entrepreneurial journey, when you're pioneering the space, when you're innovating, it's never a straightforward road. So hats off to you guys. So Thundafund. Thundafund, rewards-based crowdfunding. What is rewards-based crowdfunding? In brief, you back a project or a campaign, and in return, you don't get cash, but you get a product that's actually created by that business. So as an example, it's because it's quite fun to look at a couple of examples. I'm going to go share desktop, which is, there we go. Okay, can you see my desktop? I think so.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Thundafund.
Sorry, Patrick. I think you may not be. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I didn't see the right screen. Sorry to interrupt. You can go ahead. Thank you.
No problem. You can see. So Thundafund, as I said, rewards-based crowdfunding. It allows, as I said, people to back a business or a project, and in return they receive a product. Right now, Thundafund has raised over $3.2 million. So depending on the rand, that's either over 50 million rand or less, a bit more or a bit less. Over 1,200 individual small businesses campaigns, sometimes social impact campaigns, have raised funds through Thundafund. And I'll give you a couple examples of successful ones. The one would be quite nice is there is. I know there's been a huge kind of industry built around artisanal gins, and Rob Haynes and his team did a fantastic campaign where they raised that's $77,000, so what's it about 1.3 million rand or so. What they did is they said, look, this is our business. We're looking to produce a new range of gin. It's botanical gin. It's a super cool concept. You know me as an entrepreneur. Would you be interested in supporting us? And the kind of things that they would then offer is gin. They make gin, so you get an initial shout out if you just want to support it through a donation. $5 gets you a donation. But then you start actually saying, well, at 284 rand, so $60, you get a bottle of gin. And really what you're doing is you're testing the market to see whether people like the products you're putting out there or not. And it always amazes me that if you think 10 people want to launch a new type of gin, all of them think they've got a fantastic idea. all of them, let's say, put in 100,000 Rand into each. After a year, 3 of them will still be operating. Isn't that a huge waste of money? It's like all that time, none of those entrepreneurs believed that they were going to have a failure. But if you can create a mechanism that allows you to market check your idea and your ability to sell your product, isn't that a fantastic thing? It should be. And that's what crowdfunding is in essence, it allows you to do market research in the live world of actually selling a product. You know, we all know, you know, you get 10 friends around the table, you tell them about your great idea, or you've got a new business and you're going to be growing it, you've got a restaurant, you want to open another branch, and you tell them about it, and all 10 will say, love it, fantastic, we'll invest, we'll back you. Sure enough, when you open your restaurant, only 3 of them actually pitch up. The other 7 all have excuses and away they go. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could actually know before you spend your 100,000 Rand investing in the new gin and building up and so forth, whether you actually have a product that is going to be sellable? And that is why crowdfunding has become a powerful way to drive investment into young businesses. And I can tell you, Rob Haynes has gone on to build a very successful brand with Sugar Bear Gin. As I said, they raised 1.3 million, and they introduced a very, very interesting addition to what is crowdfunding. I'm going to take you right to the bottom, and that is for 123,000 or $7,000 US, you can actually buy a batch of gin, 1,000 bottles, roughly cost them 100,000 bucks. They would then pay you back in funds through revenue. So in other words, as they sold the gin, they would then pay you back a percentage of funds raised from the gin that is sold. In essence, you're buying 100,000 Rands worth of gin, which in lockdown you would have probably kept for yourself, but this wasn't a lockdown. In return, when the gin is sold, you'll get a percentage. So in essence, you own the gin and they become your agents for actually selling the gin. Very cool idea, and it worked really well. I also wanted to highlight one of the early campaigns which we did, one of the first, and that was for the Lavia Theatre. Now, the Lavia Theatre was in danger of closing, and they raised funds through selling a bunch of things that they already had. So they basically said, for example, for 1,000 Rand, you could buy a seat in the Lavia Theatre main thing. But you got to put your favorite movie quote on that seat and then your name underneath. So it's fun things like that where you actually sell product that you already have, which you can generate value from. And one of the campaigns I'd really like to just highlight at the moment is Nedbank are presently running an initiative with Thundafund to support their businesses that are already banked with Nedbank. And they said, look, you know, businesses don't need more loans right now. They need their customers to support them in their growth. So what they've done is they said, okay, we will use the power of the Nedbank brand to both create a verification mechanism. So if you are part of the Back a Business initiative run by Simply Biz, then that tells you that that business has at least been vetted by Nedbank, and they are an operating business as such. And what Nedbank has said is they would put a whole bunch of marketing muscle behind it. They would also say that any of the businesses that ran a campaign on Thundafund and raised funds, that you would enter into a competition where there's 100,000 Rand to be won, and they would match you Rand for Rand up to 10,000 bucks. So you'll see, for example, the Pristine Spa. What did they do? They, in essence, offered you a discount. So they said, look, we're closed right now. We're going to be opening in 3 months' time. So I tell you what, invest 250 bucks with us now, and you'll get a coupon for 300 Rand. Invest 400 with us now, and you'll get a coupon for 500. 800 gets you 1,000, 1,000 gets you 1,250. So in essence, it's a kind of pre-sale of income to come in the future, but it's going to keep them going over this period. So it's a really nice way to build up a customer base for when you reopen, and at the same time just cover some income for while businesses are closed presently. So And as you can see, there are about, there's about 13 campaigns presently live, and there's a whole bunch more in the pipeline coming through. So you can see how people are getting quite innovative in the ways they actually look to raise funds. But what Nedbank wanted to do here is importantly, they said, we don't want to load the businesses with further loans, which they're going to struggle to repay. How can we actually support businesses in a way that is going to also bring them future customers, which is what crowdfunding, which is what crowdfunding really does. The scope of what you can do, crowdfunding, rewards-based crowdfunding works particularly well in the arts and creative space. So you'll see a wide number of campaigns around the art and design and innovation space. But the beauty of what I think the initiative with Nedbank has done is when you're selling coupons or vouchers for future business, it doesn't have to be a ticket. It doesn't have to be a beauty voucher. Let's say you can sell or pre-sell a voucher for future business as a whole. So an investment in whether it's in home decor shops or gifting shops or generally consumer-based businesses, but it can be for a return of funds in the future, as in when a coupon is redeemed. Now, rewards-based crowdfunding is all about business. It is all about growing innovative businesses, and as I said, you can see the scale of some of the campaigns that have been run on Thundafund are quite significant. I'll just show you in terms of your most funded campaigns presently on Thundafund. You've got campaigns which are very much a social impact focused. So, for example, Feed a Million Children at the moment raised $640,000. I mean, 647,000 rand. Land for Lions, very much social impact as well. 3.3 million. The COVID Sweep Stars, Sweep South organization that works with domestic workers and other service workers. 107,000 rand to support their staff as such. And then into the more commercial, which is about Sugarbird Gym, Poko Police Car crowdfunding. They raised 1.3 million for a new album. These are all commercial campaigns that have done really nicely. Now, looking at your more straight donations crowdfunding, what we've seen is that in any society, if you don't have people who are able to be fed, and if you don't have people who are healthy, if they can't get medical help as such, then how can you build a society? And that's become my biggest focus, is saying underpinning successful economic growth is people who are healthy and people who are well educated. That is the biggest thing. So with that, I focused on building BackaBuddy, and you'll see BackaBuddy it's a not-for-profit organization, and it works on a cost recovery basis. So right now, BackaBuddy has raised over 176 million rand over the last couple of years. It's right now, to give you a scale, with COVID-19, we've launched over 800 individual campaigns, and those are campaigns from small campaigns for someone who says, I have a feeding program in a local area. I need to feed 30 families, so I need 5,000 rand. Up to your much larger scale campaigns. So I'll give you an example. Actually, one of the partners you work with, who Porky's People, who are actually Zane Grunewald is our head of digital marketing at BackaBuddy. But if you have a look at this post, it gives you an idea of the scope. When the Solidarity Fund first launched in South Africa, BackaBuddy was the chosen partner through which all credit card donations went. We raised a couple of $1 million through that. So it gives an idea of the credibility of BackaBuddy as an organization. Gift to the Givers, one of the most phenomenal organizations in South Africa in terms of disaster relief. BackaBuddy is their crowdfunding partner. And I'll give you an idea, Gift to the Givers has raised over 3 million rand with BackaBuddy. But the awesome thing about donations crowdfunding for something, for any cause, is it's very transparent. So you can see exactly how much has been donated by who, and also gives an idea of the scope of the people who are prepared to support. So if you have a look here, you have everything from 250 Rand up to thousands. The large donations we received for Gift the Givers was over 100,000 Rand in a single donation. So it allows every person, no matter how big or how small, to invest in things or back things that they believe in. And I'm just going to give you, like, you're scrolling through. These are the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who have all said that they believe in the work that Gift is the Giver is doing, and they will support them. So, I hope that gives you an idea of the scope of what crowdfunding can do as a concept. And if you see the kind of full breadth of what is possible, on the one side, you start with donations crowdfunding, which is about us recognizing that before we even start with economic activity, we need people who are well educated, healthy, and able to look after themselves. And in that, we recognize that there's, especially in South Africa, every campaign that goes live on BackaBuddy builds a community of people that crosses racial boundaries, cultural boundaries, economic boundaries, and brings people together around things they believe in. And so imagine in this month, we have 800 campaigns running on BackaBuddy. Each of those campaigns brings people together in a very positive way. That's what we need in SA in which to rebuild our society. So that's underpinning. But then, of course, an economy cannot survive on donations. An economy has to survive through economic activity. And that's where the next levels of crowdfunding come in. So rewards-based crowdfunding, very much about testing new ideas, raising the funds to launch new enterprises, raising the funds to expand. And then when you get to the larger scale, that's when you talk about ownership of capital. And that's where Uprise.Africa becomes very powerful, is that there, historically in South Africa, there's a huge disconnect between the populations of South Africa and the people who own the businesses and so forth. And crowdfunding is a potentially very powerful way to redress or address that economic inequality by allowing by making it more possible for people from across a much wider spectrum of South Africa to invest. And I think that's where the role between public and government could get really interesting. But look, I hope that gives you a kind of broad scope as to what we do with BackaBuddy and then Thundafund, and then in terms of what crowdfunding can do as a mechanism for both driving the support of people at large, especially in the time of COVID-19, through to the transformation of our economy. I think that's it from my part.
Wow, Patrick, thank you very, very much. That was a really rich and insightful presentation. So thank you very much for that. I mean, there's so many things to take away from it, but maybe if I could start at the end. And sorry, Patrick, could you perhaps just stop sharing your screen? Thank you. So
there we go.
Thank you very much. So yes, I think maybe there's so many takeaways from your inputs right now, and I think maybe just to start towards the end, what you're saying around the donations form of crowdfunding, which I mean earlier we spoke about rewards and equity crowdfunding, but the aspect of donation crowdfunding, and particularly in the context of COVID-19, and how BackaBuddy has, I think you said 800 different campaigns during this period, which is it's just phenomenal. So we can see how it becomes such an important tool, very much relevant in this time that we are in now. I think what's also important or valuable is that via the digital space, we are able to build communities. We obviously, with people not being able to become physically in contact with each other, the online space and online communities that are credible and that are legitimate are really important going forward, because it's a difficult space to navigate. So using the digital tools we have, it's really encouraging to see that we can build these communities, which is what crowdfunding is in part, in essence. Some other things also around from Mnangaliso and Elizabeth's presentations and to yours is that it also allows for a great deal of creativity, I think, from businesses. I mean, from coming up with new ideas, testing new ideas in the market, having immediate responses. I think that's really amazing. And something personal to me, when you mentioned the Labia, I think that I remember that campaign because I think they were trying to raise funds for a digital projector at the time. So they also had to digitize. And that, I think, is one of the gems of Cape Town. So that to know that crowdfunding was able to assist them, yeah, it's really awesome. So maybe just I see our time has almost come to a close, but I just want to pose one or two couple of questions, and then Elizabeth or Mnangaliso or Patrick, you could or any of you could respond. So in closing, perhaps one of them is it's actually maybe I hope it's not a strange question, but we can see that some campaigns are very successful, others just go beyond success. And maybe one question: have been examples where campaigns raise so much funds that they actually are almost too successful and they're not able to scale? How do businesses manage the ability to scale up to the expectations of the investors and supporters that fund them? And a second question: who's the kind of person, maybe there's not one profile, but who tends to invest in crowdfunding, who tends to be investors in crowdfunding platforms? Because I think that's something people can get involved in from a personal level or as a business and a big corporate. And then one which I think the answer is probably yes, but I would still like to ask, is whether there's quite a big uptake of investing in South African campaigns from the overseas investor community. So if any of you have any comments or feedback on those questions or anything else you might like to add in closing from your side, I'd like to hand over to you. Mnangaliso, Elizabeth, or Patrick, either of you can jump in. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Patrick. Sorry.
Okay. But look, from our side, first you said, have there been campaigns that have been so successful that it's difficult for people to deliver on the product? From the donation side, I'll give you an example. The petrol attendant in Korsiko, who
yes.
basically a couple of years ago, there's a lady who's driving from Somerset West through to Cape Town. She wanted to fill up in Somerset West, realized she didn't have the cash, so I said to in Corsi, look, sorry, I'll just have to wing it. Hopefully I'll get there. And he was like, look, way too dangerous. I'm going to put in $100 off my own account, off you go. And she was blown away. So when she came back, she paid her the money back, and she was like, look, people need to know about what you're doing. Put a campaign up, and people just were like, this guy's amazing. And within a couple of days, it raised over 200,000. Within a week, 500,000 rand. And he actually said, please, that's enough. He says, I don't need any more than this. He feels it would be unfair in terms of what he's done and what people reward him with. So it gives an example there of from a social side, how someone actually said, I have received enough. That is enough, which was amazing.
Okay.
So that's on that side, and then on the investment side, on BackaBuddy, more than 30% of all donations received into BackaBuddy are through international donors, and we strongly believe that South Africa, it's not about the people. When you talk about South Africa as a nation, there's no geographic boundaries as such. South Africa is a nation that stretches across the globe. And it doesn't matter whether you're living in London, New York, or Kinshasa for that matter. If you identify as South African, you are South African, and that is the audience and people that we speak to, which is why we look at BackaBuddy and Thundafund as having the potential scope to reach people across the world. And that is, again, it's the power of crowdfunding. Mnangaliso, I'll leave it to you to speak for you guys.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Last comments from Mnangaliso and Elizabeth?
Okay, so on my side, I think, success story in terms of being overfunded. I think one of them from our side was the one that I profiled, which was the Drifters Brewery. As you see, the target was 3 million, but we managed to go to 3.7 million to a point where they said, no, we cannot give up more equity. So we need to stop the funding process from here, and maybe perhaps we'll do another round of capital raise at another point. So because you're appealing to a retail market, what we see, so this will answer the second question in terms of the profile of investors, that's one. Because we're going into a retail market to profile the businesses, what we then see is that a lot of them identify with businesses that they understand. So a brewery, for instance, they understand the product. It's not so complicated. So for a business like Mali, a retail investor, although the valuations may show that the business is solid and can make a fantastic return for the investor, but because the investor cannot identify with the end product, what is it that you're selling? How is it going to give me a return? Sometimes then they shy away from such kind of investors. But I think for entrepreneurs, I mean, it's across the board. I mean, equity crowdfunding presents an opportunity to actually even go as far as raise capital from a BE market or from a female-only market, if you have a product that only appeals to that kind of market setup. So one thing is it gives you a regulated and a well administered platform to actually make your investment, and also for entrepreneurs to attract beyond their circles. So if it's beyond family and friends, you can actually also appeal to Joe Public as well. So this is a fantastic opportunity for them. And then I think we've also seen a lot of uptake, as Patrick has highlighted, from overseas investors. One of our campaign called Sun Exchange, we had a lot because the mother company is actually a US company. We saw that there was a lot of US investors and Canadians right through to China, and so we do attract, because it's an online platform. It does tend to attract a global audience in terms of investors coming on board. Although in certain jurisdictions, certain markets are very highly regulated when it comes to investing in crowdfunding. For instance, in the US, they are very strict in terms of their financial controls and investing in crowdfunding platforms, because such platforms are also very susceptible to a lot of fraud activity and money laundering activity as well. So some of, for instance, in the US, they've got laws that actually govern, unless you're registered within the US jurisdiction, you are not able to invest in such platforms. But I mean, we are quite excited that Africa is actually pushing this agenda and making these kind of initiatives available, and making investment and reaching out to entrepreneurs on the ground, because the marriage of the two is quite very difficult. There's investors that say there's no opportunities, I don't see any lucrative opportunities. On the other side, entrepreneurs are sitting and say we don't have access to capital. So these kind of platforms do actually give that opportunity to be available. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Mnangaliso. Elizabeth, any last comments from your side before we wrap up?
I'll be very quick. Just on the investor profile. Abroad, the majority of investors tend to be customers of the service or consumers of the product. That's your first range of customers. And then I think there's some stats that say about 60 to 70% of investors using crowdfunding are below the age of 50 years. So it is a millennial service. And they definitely tend to get behind people they believe in, like Mnangaliso has just said. And that is very, very powerful. And then, yeah, for foreign investors in Africa, like I mentioned, it's actually the bulk of crowdfunding historically has come from foreigners into Africa, and it tends to be for social projects and education projects, a lot of donations. Platforms like Kiva, for example, channel huge amounts of funding through local microfinance institutions to African entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs. And that is a donations-based model because donations are not regulated. But as Mnangaliso has explained, as soon as you get into a regulated type of crowdfunding, things get a lot more complicated for foreign investors. And you add to that South Africa's capital controls and other restrictions, and it gets very tricky. But that's why we're working hard on getting an appropriate framework in place. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and Mnangaliso and Patrick. I think today's session was excellent, and you've provided so much rich information and important insights for us and our audience. So before I wrap up, I just want to thank all our panelists once again very much for your time and for sharing your knowledge so freely and so generously with our community, and then to our audience also. But just before I sign off, I just want to share my screen again. And if I can ask everybody to turn off their mics, I think. So as you know, the Go Digital webinar series is continuing. Upcoming topics in June will be cybersecurity and data privacy for SMMEs. Another topic will be legal bootcamp for your online business, and then also e-commerce, logistics, and systems. So please watch the space. You'll be sending out invitations and notifications about that quite shortly. And then for those of you who have missed our previous webinars, you can go to our website. You can see it at the top over here, our Go Digital webinar website. There are recordings of our previous webinars. And then lastly, if you want to contact us, our details are on the screen. You can contact our office at DDAT, and then we also have the contact emails for Elizabeth, Mnangaliso, and for Patrick. So from our side at the Digital Economy Unit and the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, to our speakers, once again, thanks for a brilliant session and for being wonderful panelists. To our audience, thanks for your time, for joining us, and for your interest. We hope to see all of you on the next round. And then to the team behind the scenes, thank you to everybody there also. From the Go Digital Webinar Western Cape team and the department, keep well, stay safe, and stay warm today. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.